my eyes that I may see. There were so many things to see that we often take for granted or don't pay attention to. In this song, in awesome wonder, I consider all the things that your hands have made. That certainly applies to this week. In Great is Thy Faithfulness, which we'll sing later, it speaks of the summer and the winter and the springtime and the harvest, the sun and the moon and the stars in their courses above, all bringing glory to God. There was a lot of that to see this week, if we took the time to look. There's been a lot of that to see all year, but perhaps we didn't notice. I'd like to begin by reading Matthew 16, verses 1 through 3. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees came to test him, Jesus Christ. They asked him to show them a sign from heaven. He answered them, when it's evening, you say it's going to be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it'll be stormy today, because the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. The title of today's message is, Can You Read the Signs? We read earlier, I should read it again, Genesis 1, verses 3 through 5. God said, let there be light, and there was light. And he saw that the light was good, and he separated light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning. Separating light from darkness. And then gave it two different names, day and night. And then in the next verse it says, and there was evening and there was morning, one day. Two more terms. That's a long study just in itself. 6 different words used to describe the difference between day and night, light and darkness, morning and evening. But look at verse 14. God put light in the firmament of the heaven, in the framework of the expanse of the heavens, plural, to separate the day from the night. And he said, let them be for signs, seasons, days, years, and to be lights, to give light to the earth. It also was to separate light from darkness. 6 different purposes. We don't have time to get into all of that today either. I just want to focus on one of those. Signs. See, most people are totally unaware or unknowledgeable of the lights in the firmament, the expanse, the things up there in heaven. We look up, we see stars, we see the moon. Sometimes we see a comet. And that may be as far as we pay attention. But some people actually study and remember constellations and planetary alignments and all kinds of things that go on up there. So how come we're so ignorant of that? Well, it all began with Cain. If you look in Genesis chapter 4, verse 10, now we all know Cain killed his brother, Abel. And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You'll be a fugitive and a wanderer in the earth. And Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me this day away from the ground. Look at verse 16. Cain went away from the presence of the Lord, and he dwelt in the land of Nod, east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, and he built a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. Today we have roofs over our head, screens in front of our faces, most of the time, for many people. Can't see beyond the roof. You can't see beyond this, or even if it's across the room, you're not paying attention to what's outside. I mean, we're walled in. Walls and roofs that separate us from what God made. It started with Cain. He built the first city to separate himself from God. Walls of separation. That's where it all began. But over time, some of mankind has still retained a recognition and an awareness of what God has created. Some people are actually still attached to the ground, but some still look up at the sky. In the Hebrew culture, they wore robes, but at the bottom of their robes, God instructed them to put a stripe of blue. When they looked up, blue reminded you of God. When you looked down, downcast, it was that blue stripe to remind you of God. Look back up. Throughout time, some people have paid attention to the signs in the heavens. But the most famous one that everyone remembers is that Star of Bethlehem. When that occurred, Magi came from the east. It's recorded in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem and said, where is he that's born King of the Jews? We've seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. Now, Herod and the priests and the scribes, they didn't know Jesus Christ had been born. They didn't know their Messiah had been born. But somehow these people from the far east knew. How did they know? Well, that's recorded in the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verses 47 and 48. This is King Nebuchadnezzar being referred to here. The king said to Daniel, truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and revealer of mysteries. For you have been able to reveal this mystery. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream and didn't understand it. And Daniel interpreted it for him, asked to give him the interpretation. And God told him what the dream was all about. And so Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar. He was amazed. And then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. How did the wise men from the east learn of the prophecies and to know to look into the sky and await the sign in the heavens heavens to know when the Messiah was born? Where do you think they learned it? Hundreds of years passed from the time of Daniel to the time of the birth of Jesus Christ. Now this week, there were northern lights here, there was a comet passing by, and I searched. I didn't get the greatest view. I was given misinformation, went out at the wrong time of the night, didn't see the greatness of what was photographed by others, so I missed it because I wasn't knowledgeable. And I trusted in the knowledge of others. Well, that same thing happens to us and to the people of the world. Unless people are knowledgeable about the Word of God, they can be misled. They can be sent searching and still never find what they're looking for. Signs in the heavens. It's pretty amazing that people have the patience and the time and the diligence to do that. I look here because I have a list of events. But before I get to that, let me just say that today, astronomers still exist. There are people like the wise men of Babylon, the Magi they were called, that studied the heavens, studied the stars. But today our astronomers no longer attach a spiritual significance to what they see. Yes, they record the movements, they can calculate where things be positioned in the sky at certain times of the year and different cycles. But they've discarded their understanding, or anyone's understanding of spiritual significance to those events. The Magi were a group of people that understood spiritual significance to those events. There was a point in time where the Magi split in their understanding of things. Some adhered to the teachings of Zoroaster and also what they had learned from Daniel, and others went a different route. And in the split of the Magi, there were those in the east and those that settled down into the Roman Empire later on in history. And from that you get a divergence in a perception of the constellations of what went on in space, up in the sky. You have those that adhered more toward the biblical Hebrew perception of the constellations, and then those that went to what we now know as the zodiac. And so each of those constellations had an original meaning, divergent from what's taught and promoted today. Same constellations, similar names. The star names have been preserved for thousands of years. But the spiritual significance and understanding of the stars has changed. And what was once understood as the Hebrew perception of the meaning of the constellations has been forgotten by most. I highly recommend you read this book, The Witness of the Stars, by a man named Ethelbert Bullinger. You can look at it afterwards. And he traced and recorded from other people's works and compiled, and I believe he did this in the 1800s, I'm not quite sure, copyright year. But he gathered it and he put it together for the purpose of reintroducing to the modern world of his time the original understanding of the stars. But not only have astronomers today lost that understanding or have forsaken that understanding, rejected it, but even by the time of Jesus Christ, the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the scribes and the kings had forsaken looking up and understanding understanding what was coming. That's why they didn't know Jesus Christ was born. They weren't looking for the signs. They ceased to look. I read it just before I began. Matthew 16, 1 through 3 records how Herod had to send the scribes to go searching to find out where the Messiah was to be born. They came back with the answer, Bethlehem. But they had no idea that the time was now. When Jesus Christ spoke to the Pharisees, he said, you can understand looking at the sky what the weather's going to be like tomorrow, but you are not aware of the signs of the times. But let me read you some of the signs of the times. This is a list. Not a complete list, but it fills this page of the celestial events of 2024. February 9th, there was a super new moon. Now, when it's called a super new moon, it's one of those really big, massive ones that come up over the horizon because it's when the moon is at one of its closest points to the planet Earth in its orbital rotation. It's elliptical, it's not round. February 9th, there was a super new moon. March 10th, there was a super new moon. March 22nd, a comet flew past Earth. It's known as the Devil's Comet. But then 2 days later was a lunar eclipse on the first day of the Hebrew holiday of Purim. It was a blood moon, meaning that the moon shone with a reddish sheen on it. Purim is a celebration of the salvation of the Jews during the time that Esther was queen in Persia and potentially would have lost her life had she not intervened to let the king know of the plan to kill all of her people, God's people. On that day this year, we had a lunar eclipse just after the Devil's Comet went by. On April 8th, there was a total solar eclipse where the sun, the moon, and 7 planets lined up. The same day, there was another super new moon. 3 months in a row. Just a few weeks later, April 21st and 22nd, there was a meteor shower in the constellation of Lyra, the harp. Music. May 4th and 5th, there was what was called Earthshine mornings, where there's either waning or waxing moon, so you get the crescent, but the dark part that usually doesn't show up was visible because of sunlight reflecting off of Earth and lighting up the rest of the moon. As that happened the 4th and the 5th, from the 5th to the 6th, there was another set of meteor showers. This time in Aquarius, the water bearer, followed by the 11th and 12th of May, where there was 2 more Earthshine nights. Then there was August 1st, where Venus rose as the evening star and has been will be from August on 8 months in a row. It'll be there. August 12th and 13th, another meteor shower in this constellation of Perseus. And the biblical understanding, the Hebrew understanding of Perseus is the breaker, the one who breaks bondage to releases the prisoners. Right after that meteor shower for 2 nights on August 14th, there was another conjunction lining up Mars and Jupiter and Earth. Jupiter, by the way, represents the king planet. Mars represents war. 21st, there was a full moon of August. There was a full moon, and it passed right in front of, blocking the view of Saturn. Right in front of it. 1 week later, August 28th, a comet went by. On September 8th, Saturn was in the opposite side of the Earth from the sun, and so it was visible all night long, because from sunset to sunrise, the reflection of the light lit up Saturn. Then September 17th through 18th, there was a partial lunar eclipse that traveled across. And then September 8th, as that ended, there was another super full moon. And then on the 22nd, in the northern hemisphere, we had our fall equinox, where the days and the nights were equal. October 2nd, now we're getting up to just this past week, there was an annular solar eclipse. Now by annular, it means that the moon in its distance from the Earth is appears smaller, it's further away. So as it passed in front of the sun, it didn't fully block it out. There was a ring of fire, brightness around the moon. It only blocked most of the sun. October 3rd, 1 day later, this newly discovered comet, the one that they tell us took 80,000 years to do its elliptical orbit, was discovered, never seen before, because no one's paying attention and wrote it down 80,000 years ago. But they mathematically derived that it's in this long elliptical orbit. And if this is Earth, and you're talking about a very long ellipse, it was passing by, and then it went this way, and now this week it's coming back, headed away. That was October 3rd. Well, coincidentally, that comet arrived on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Now, nowadays, just like most things have been corrupted, most people think of Rosh Hashanah as just the Jewish New Year, the beginning of the year, but that's not. And the beginning of the Jewish year is in the spring. They say Happy New Year. When the trumpets are blown at the time of Rosh Hashanah, it's a call to repentance and judgment. That's the original significance of the day. In October 8th and 9th, as that meteor shower went, another meteor shower took place. And that was in the Draco constellation, the dragon. That occurred for 2 nights, the 8th and 9th. On the 10th, we had the northern lights appear here. On the 12th, which was yesterday, the comet was passing by again on its way out. On the 17th of this month, there will be another super full moon. But this time it's going to be the largest one of the year. The moon will be at its closest to the surface of the Earth. And then 3 days later, on the 20th and 21st, there'll be another meteor shower, this time in the constellation of Orion, referred to biblically as the Glorious One. On November 17th and 18th, there'll be another meteor shower, this time in the constellation of Leo, the lion, as in the Lion of Judah. Then on December 7th, Jupiter will be on the opposite side of Earth from the sun, and it will be visible all night long, from sunset to sunrise. On December 14th and 15th, there'll be another meteor shower in Gemini, the twins. On December 22nd and 23rd, there'll be another meteor shower in Ursa, the bear. And then on December 30th, not a common event, there will be 2 new moons. New moon is when you don't see the moon. The sky, in the shadow of earth and it's obliterated from view. But there'll be two that month, and the year ends December 30th with a second new moon. When the name, the title they give to a second new moon is the black moon. There's a lot more than this. I mean, that's a long list. There's other things that they didn't even write down. It's just, there was too much. But perhaps some of you may have heard, and maybe I mentioned it, back in October of 2023, there was one of those ring of fire solar eclipses that crossed in viewing across the United States. And then in April 2024, a total solar eclipse also was visible across the United States. But the path crossed over the United States, forming an X, 6 months apart. But the cross-section of those two pathways was just about San Antonio, Texas. What does that mean? I don't know. I wasn't taught these things. I'm just reading from a list of occurrences. But I'd like to have you look at Luke chapter 21. Verses 25 through 28. And there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and upon the earth distress of nations in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves, men fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then you will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and glory. Now when these things begin to take place, look up, raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Throughout history, people have thought they have lived in the end times. They looked at the circumstances of the world, the politics of what's going on, and they think it's got to be close. Jesus Christ, come back. Yes, we want Jesus Christ to come back. We look forward to that day. Are we there yet? I don't know. Can we read the signs? There's stuff going on up there that I don't understand. I haven't read this and mastered this book, nor any others that may have been written on the subject. But I raise the question, can we read the signs? We're looking forward to our destination. Jesus Christ is coming back.